Now, as much as I love it, the world of microphones can quickly become overwhelming if you're just jumping in for the first time because prices range from super affordable to as much as a nice car. So, I'm going to try to keep things super simple by looking at two different ways of differentiating microphones. The first and probably the biggest way to separate microphones is USB versus XLR. Now, this right here is an XLR microphone running into my Rodecaster Pro, which is an XLR mixer and interface. And now you're listening to me on the Rode NT Plus, which is a USB microphone that is just connected directly to my MacBook right here, and I'm recording into the MacBook. So, USB microphones, there are so many of them at every price point, and in general, they are the simplest way to go when it comes to selecting a microphone if you're just starting from scratch, because they do just connect directly to your computer with a USB cable. All you need to do then is select the mic as an audio source in your recording software, and you're all set. Most USB microphones even come with a cable. A lot of them work with phones and tablets and not just computers. So that means you just have a ton of flexibility. Basically, you buy your microphone and you're all set. Maybe the only other thing you need to buy is a stand of some kind. The one I'm using right now is an Onstage brand stand. I don't want it to blend in. And this is a tabletop stand that just extends out a little bit. And that's kind of cool because it adds a little bit of height into the microphone. Still potentially though, picking up some of those tabletop sounds. Now, there was a time in the past where USB microphones did have a reputation for sounding like USB microphones, but that time has passed. Leave it in the past. And USB microphones should really not sound any different if they're set up properly from an XLR microphone. There's so much potential for user error with microphones. You can get XLR microphones sounding bad, USB mics sounding bad, but most USB microphones are capable of sounding absolutely awesome, even if you're just using really simple, super basic recording software and doing very little to no processing or editing on your sound. So all that to say, no one should really be able to tell whether you're using a USB or XLR microphone. There's nothing wrong with USB microphones. They're not lesser than or anything. They're just a different option and a really flexible and practical option in a lot of ways. You can always use software to dial in the sound of your microphone. Like right now, I'm recording this directly into a piece of software called Adobe Audition, which is audio recording software that's designed kind of for podcasting and spoken word. But I could also just be using QuickTime or OBS or Audacity or GarageBand. Like, it doesn't really matter. Even if I were in a Zoom call or something, I could select this microphone and make it my audio source. Some USB microphones do come with their own applications that help you adjust the sound, and that is true for this one right here. I do have an application from Rode that lets me kind of dial in some processing and make the mic sound exactly how I want it to sound. But other USB microphones like this one, the Sennheiser Profile, which I'm being very careful to handhold without making any noise. I know that this microphone is very good at rejecting handling noise, so for now it's okay that I'm hand-holding it. But even though I would recommend you always use a stand or a boom arm, do as I say, not as I do. This microphone, like some USB microphones, does not come with any specialized applications or anything. This is something you just select it in your recording software and then you can process the sound that way. But there are differences with microphones. Like some come with software, some don't. Something I have noticed is that a lot of USB microphones that come with software come with missing physical features. So I really absolutely love the sound of the Rode NT Plus that I was using before. But even though it has these knobs on the side and I can plug my headphones directly into it, it's missing a couple things. I have no way of muting this microphone on the microphone itself, and I also have no way of adjusting the gain, the level of this microphone on the mic itself. I have to do all of that in software or in my computer. Microphones like this Sennheiser Profile, this is probably my easiest to recommend USB microphone. It's about $100 or a little bit more. This one is closer to $200, I think, currently. But again, there's so many different ones. This has so many buttons and dials on it. I can do everything from the microphone itself. I can mute the microphone, I can adjust the gain, I can adjust the mix in my headphones, not just the level of my headphones, but also how much I'm hearing from my computer, how much I'm hearing from the headphones. This does have that. This does have headphone and mix options, but no mute and no gain. And gain is really what I think is the most important physical control for a USB microphone to have, because especially if you're just starting out, you might not want to dig into your computer settings. You might not want to dig into specialized software. You just want to connect your microphone, press record, and go. And a microphone like this that has all these physical controls lets you do that. So just be sure, if you're getting a USB microphone, that you are aware of what physical controls it does and doesn't have, and what software applications it also does and doesn't have. Definitely also get a USB microphone that has its own headphone output. Most of them do, but not all of them do. And it's very confusing when they don't, because you really need to be able to monitor your audio in real time. And the only way to do that with a USB microphone is to plug your headphones directly into the microphone itself. if you run your headphones into your computer, there's always going to be a little bit of latency, a little bit of delay that's going to make things sound really weird. It's going to kind of break your brain and make it very hard to talk and listen at the same time. So you need zero latency monitoring. The only way to get that is by plugging your headphones directly into the back of the microphone itself. And in general, whether you're using a PC or a Mac, there should be some sound options when you connect your USB microphone. If you go into your sound settings, you should be able to select the microphone as your input device and then adjust the gain. Even if the mic does have a physical gain control, your computer has its own independent gain control, and you probably don't want to just max that out to 100%. So on your computer's gain, I recommend starting at about 75% and then adjusting the microphone if you're able to, and then kind of fine tuning it from there. So that way you don't just max out and clip your audio where it's going to sound distorted and terrible. 75% is a good place to start. You can bump it up a little bit if you need to, or turn it down if you need to do that as well. So if you're just starting out, a USB microphone is probably the simplest way to get up and running. There are a ton of great options, not just from Rode and Sennheiser, but all kinds of brands out there. If you're looking for a really great super budget option, I have found that a brand called Fifine makes some really great and really affordable microphones that sound probably better than they should for the price point. You do sometimes sacrifice build quality, or they do tend to be very prone to handling noise, but you're getting a very inexpensive microphone with a really good sound for a really low price. So some of those are just sacrifices you have to make. When you jump up to the higher end microphones from more premium brands like Sennheiser or Rode, then you also get build quality and durability on top of good sound quality. So now that I made USB microphones look like the most obvious choice in the world because they're simple, they're affordable, they're high quality, why would anyone be crazy enough to choose an XLR microphone instead? What on earth would the benefits be? The microphone I'm talking into right now is that Rode NT1 Signature Series, which is an XLR condenser microphone, and that's what this cable is coming out the back. This is an XLR cable. XLR microphones are by far the most varied type of microphone in the world. You have thousands and thousands of different models to choose from at all different price points. So if you want just the widest array of options, XLR is definitely the way to go. And since XLR microphones are relatively simple electronically, they can last for a really long time. They don't depend on specific computers or software applications or firmware to be updated. This right here is a 20-year-old Shure SM57. This was actually the very first microphone I ever bought back in college, which is scary to think that that was 20 years ago, but it sounds every bit as good as this Rode NT1 Signature Series that I've had for less than a year at this point, because XLR microphones just kind of last forever. So if I took this 20-year-old SM57 and bought an SM57 today and then compared it with also a 40-year-old SM57, they would all pretty much sound exactly the same. You have that reliability, especially when you're dealing with good, reliable brands. The microphones just kind of last forever. And it is that weird thing, almost like instruments, where an older microphone sometimes can even be more desirable and more premium and have a premium price attached to it. That's something that just does not happen with USB microphones, which can last a long time, especially if they're relatively simple. But in reality, can you depend on a USB microphone to keep working after 10 or 20 years, especially if it does require on a specific application to sound its best? Now, a lot of that still comes down to personal preference, but there is a much more practical side to XLR microphones, which has to do with using multiple microphones at the same time. There are some niche options when it comes to connecting multiple USB mics to the same computer, but in general, it's a very tricky and potentially frustrating and limiting thing to do. So if you know that you want to use more than one microphone on a regular basis, I think that XLR is really the only way to go. Even in these lessons, you've seen me switch between XLR microphones. I can just push the mute button on the Rodecaster and switch microphones. When I had to switch between the USB microphones, I had to stop the recording, I had to plug in the microphone, I had to select a different input source, and I could only use one at a time. I couldn't have both USB microphones recording at the same time. But unlike many USB microphones, most XLR microphones don't come with their own cable, so that means you will need to buy your own XLR cable. And just a side note, especially I'm very color coordinated right now, I do really like these Rode XLR cables because they are really good quality without being too expensive, and they come in these amazing bright colors, which I really like. They do also come in classic black if you want to keep things subtle and simple. And there are some really cheap XLR cables out there, but they can also be prone to interference, especially if they're around other electronic devices or phones. You can kind of get weird, staticky interference noise happening, and they can also just be prone to failure. I've had some, $6 to $10 XLR cables that seemed to work okay until one day they just didn't. And there was nothing I can do about that. If you spend a little bit more money, These Rode cables usually range from $30 to $40 a piece, but if you get cables kind of in that price range from, any reputable brand, then you're going to get something that's probably going to last a lot longer. It's not going to just randomly fail, and it's also going to be a lot less likely to be prone to interference. But now, as you might have guessed, a big thing that separates XLR versus USB microphones is you can't just connect an XLR microphone directly to your computer. If you want to search for them, there are things called XLR to USB cables, and it's like an XLR on one end and a USB on the other. Those don't work. Stay away from those. They're just it doesn't work. If you're using an XLR microphone, you need an XLR interface of some kind that's going to let your XLR microphone interface with your computer. Now, some interfaces are super simple. Like this is a Focusrite Scarlett. This has one XLR input, a headphone output, and then it connects to my computer through USB. Essentially, you can kind of think of it that this turns an XLR microphone into a USB microphone because it lets it talk to your computer. There are also more complex and advanced interfaces like the Rodecaster Pro 2 that I'm using here. This lets me connect up to 4 XLR microphones at the same time. It lets me process the audio inside. A simple interface like this doesn't have any EQ or processing. It just gets the signal into the computer. The Rodecaster, I can actually adjust the microphone sound how I want it directly in here. I can load in sound effects. I can mix in sound from other sources like computers and other devices. I can also then record directly in here, which is what I'm doing right now. This is not connected to a computer. I'm just recording internally. But then this can also function as an interface with the computer if I connect it through USB, and then I can get all of this audio into whatever computer application I'm using. So you can get very, very advanced when it comes to XLR interfaces, or you can keep things very, very simple. There's no right or wrong. It's all about just what works best for you. Obviously, from a practical standpoint, simple interfaces are going to be less expensive. You can get these for $100 or even a little bit less. You can get some really decent ones, whereas the more advanced options like the Rodecasters and things like that can be hundreds of dollars, close to $1,000. And then you can get into the world of audio. There's no shortage of ways to spend your money when it comes to the world of audio equipment. So just kind of know anywhere from about $100-ish for a basic XLR interface all the way up to about $800 for like a 4-channel Rodecaster Pro. So as we're talking about our mic selection, that covers some of the basics between XLR and USB microphones, but there's also another factor to consider, and that is dynamic versus condenser microphones. This NT1 Signature Series is a condenser microphone, and the condensed explanation of what that means is that it actually requires power in order to run. From my Rodecaster, from any interface, you might see a button that says 48 volts, or you might see something that says phantom power. If you turn that on, that actually provides a small amount of power, electrical power, through your XLR cable to the microphone. It powers the capsule, and that's how the microphone works. The good news is every XLR interface I've ever seen has phantom power. It is not a new invention. It's something that's been around for decades. And the even better news is that condenser microphones require very little gain once you have them connected to phantom power. I'm using 30 decibels of gain on this Rodecaster Pro 2 that goes all the way up to 76. So I'm using less than half of the available gain to get a great sound out of this microphone on this interface. This is now the Shure SM7B, which is a very popular dynamic XLR microphone. You might recognize it because they're used everywhere, and these have been around for half a century at this point. Dynamic microphones are designed to pick up sound very close to the microphone itself. In general, you want to keep about a fist's distance, or a fistance, as I like to call it, from the microphone, and that's going to help you sound your best while also picking up as little background environmental noise as possible. If I get far away from this, it's going to stop picking up sound, and if I get too close to it, it's going to have what's called the proximity effect, which kind of boosts some of those low ends. You hear people do that on the radio a lot, but if I stand about a fist's distance away from the microphone, it sounds pretty natural, and it works pretty well. This is a very high-quality microphone. I did say that these are designed to pick up sound closer to the microphone. If I go back over here to this condenser microphone, it doesn't mean that it picks up sound from far away. It's not intended to be a shotgun microphone boomed out of frame. But if you notice, I can be quite a bit further away than just a single fist distance, and it still sounds really good, and it's really crisp and really clear. But you might also notice this is picking up a little bit more of my room tone. You can hear a little bit more of those reverb and a little bit more of those reflections, a little bit, versus the SM7B over here, which is doing a bit better of a job of isolating just my voice and not picking up the environmental sound. A little bit. It's not a night and day difference, I don't think, but there is a bit of a difference when it comes to picking up background noise between condenser and dynamic microphones. Now, dynamic microphones do tend to require more gain from your interface or your mixer. They usually need somewhere between 45 decibels and 60 decibels. So that's a lot more than I was using with the NT1 Signature Series here. But it is important to know how much gain your interface has, because not every interface has enough gain to power every dynamic microphone in a way that's going to help it sound its best. There are ways to overcome that. We're going to dive more into that in the recording section, but just kind of keep that in mind right now. Now, there is that thing that I mentioned a minute ago where people kind of think that condenser microphones pick up more background noise or dynamic microphones don't, and there is truth to that. But I have seen people think that that means they can use a dynamic microphone in a warehouse with no sound treatment and it's going to sound amazing, where it won't, versus using a condenser microphone only can be in like a professional studio environment. No microphone like that is going to make up for complete lack of sound treatment or a terrible recording space. So kind of keep that in mind. We talked about recording space and setting up your space already, and the importance of sound treatment and quiet. Your sound treatment and your overall environment and your recording space is going to make a way bigger impact on your recording than whether you're using a dynamic or a condenser microphone. Both of these are used on podcasts. Both of these types of microphones are used for music and instruments and singing. There is no right or wrong. They just work a little differently and sound a little bit different. Condenser microphones usually tend to be bright and crisp, while dynamic microphones tend to be a little like warmer and rounder and kind of full sounding. In general, you can obviously EQ things to kind of match in different ways though. So I'm going to come back now to what has quickly become the slogan of the course. There's no right or wrong. It's all about what works for you. Condenser and dynamic microphones are both wonderful. XLR microphones have condenser and dynamic options, and USB microphones also have condenser and dynamic options. So you're not limited whether you're using XLR or USB to using either only condenser or dynamic. You have the option for both. And what I think is really the most difficult thing when it comes to selecting your microphone is finding something that works on your voice. You can listen to me talk into a microphone and maybe hear how my voice compares to yours. Maybe your voice is deeper than mine or higher than mine. And if I'm talking into a microphone that sounds like it's a little too leaning towards the high end and you have a higher voice than me, you might know that that microphone could potentially sound worse on your voice. Whereas if you have a very deep voice and I need a microphone that's going to add like some bass to my voice or something, maybe you don't want a microphone that's going to emphasize the bassiness of your voice. Some microphones have more specific character to their sound. Like you plug them in, you kind of know exactly how they sound right away. Whereas other microphones like this SM7B have very neutral, kind of flat characters, and frequency response is kind of the technical term there. But that sort of means they're not emphasizing the high end of the audio frequencies. They're not emphasizing the low ends. It's kind of like as flat and neutral as possible, which usually means that straight out of the box, it's going to sound a little bit dull. If I go back to the SM7B over here and I turn off the processing that I have, this is just what this microphone sounds like straight out of the box, which is, it doesn't sound as good as it could. But what that means is then I can add in some processing and some EQ, and I can make this microphone sound the way that I want it to on my specific voice. So you're using a microphone, you're combining it with some software and some EQ. Some microphones need a little less than that. Some need more than that. Again, there's so many variables. It's all about what you like and what you think sounds best with your voice. And I gotta say too, I get made fun of a lot for this, talk about windscreens for color and stuff. The style and the design of the microphone works. I have microphones that I know are high quality microphones and they sound great, but like I honestly just don't really like the design of them, so I don't use them that often. This blue NT1 Signature Series with the nice shiny silver top, that doesn't matter if I'm doing an audio only podcast. It doesn't even matter if I'm doing a video podcast really, because it's not affecting the sound, but it's affecting my experience. It's the reason my guitars are these colors. I didn't just get all black guitars or all white guitars. I got all these different colors because that affects my experience as the user. I want to play my instruments more, not just because I like playing instruments, but because they make me feel happy. When I see the colors that I like and the designs and the styles that I like, it makes me want to use that thing more. So there's nothing wrong with focusing on the visuals of a microphone. The visual aesthetics are part of it when you're selecting your microphone, especially if you're not someone like me who's going to, for some reason, buy like 40 microphones over the years and you're just going to kind of buy like your one microphone that you're going to use. There's nothing wrong with taking the time to find something that you're really excited about and that makes you want to use it even more. Now, last but not least, there are microphones that offer both USB and XLR functionality like this one here. This is the Shure MV7 Plus, and I'm using it as an XLR microphone right now. But there's also a USB port on the back of this microphone that lets me connect it to my computer, and then I can even have all these cool touch controls up here that let me like adjust the volume and the mix and mute it and cool stuff like that. I don't get those functionality through XLR, but then I can just plug this directly into the Rodecaster. So this is kind of cool. This is not the only microphone that has combo options. There are actually a pretty decent number of combo mics out there now, and there's kind of more all the time. And it basically means that you now have a lot of versatility. So a combo mic like this could be the perfect choice for some people because it can be a great option if you want to start simple with a USB setup. You just plug this into your computer and you're good to go. But then over time, if you want to evolve to a multi-mic XLR setup, you can just keep using the same microphone. I know some people who use a microphone like this for work where they plug it into their computer through USB, but then when they want to do a podcast, they actually take the microphone and then plug it in via XLR to their podcasting setup. So they can use the same microphone in two totally different setups. Also, some USB microphones like this Shure, they have their custom apps. When you go into the app and you adjust the sound of the microphone, you can make it sound a certain way and it works great over USB. Those settings do not affect the XLR output. It's just an important thing to kind of keep in mind that if you have a USB XLR combo mic and you make some setting adjustments to the sound through USB, that will apply to all the ways you're using the microphone in USB. But if you connect it through to XLR, then it won't work that way. And most, not all, but most XLR USB combo mics can be used simultaneously. So if I wanted, I could have this going into my computer, recording in there and recording here, which means I could get, double backup kind of redundancy for my recordings, but it also means I could use it for sort of different things. If I wanted to record in here directly for a podcast, but then run it into some sort of different computer setup for a stream or something where I'm processing the sound in real time and I'm using just the raw sound over here, there's some pretty cool versatility that opens up when you're using a combo mic. And very quickly, I do want to touch on the topic of lavalier microphones, which are sort of these small microphones that can clip directly onto clothing and accessories, and they're super small and compact. These can sound really, really good, and they can be super versatile, but they're usually not used for podcasting because it is a bit more work to EQ them because it's very easy to make mistakes when positioning. Instead of having the mic positioned out in front of me, you usually end up with a lavalier microphone kind of below you on your chest or your collar, and you kind of get this, see this like boxy sort of sound versus a very clear sound. And when you have this sound, it sometimes takes a lot more work to EQ it so that it can sound like this, and it's never going to sound quite exactly like this. So these usually aren't used for podcasting just because it takes so much work to make them sound good, and especially if you're a beginner, there's a lot more opportunity for mistakes and errors there. And if you position something wrong where suddenly it's, kind of covered up by something or it's rustling up against a piece of clothing the whole time, then you can kind of ruin a podcast recording without realizing it because you end up with unusable audio. So these are very specialized. They are awesome. Like lavalier microphones and wireless mic systems are great. If that's all you have, and you need to make that work for your podcast, it's very, very possible, very, very usable. But if you can choose, I would definitely not recommend using lavalier microphones like this for podcasts. I would rather stick with a, broadcast style microphone, a traditional microphone like this for podcasting. And I do have a bunch of different microphone reviews and comparisons on my YouTube channel in a special playlist. So I'll link to that in the notes for this lesson as well if you want to check out specific microphones and comparisons to see what might sound the best on your specific unique voice. So now that we've covered the basics of mic selection, I think it sounds like a good idea to head into the next lesson where we're going to talk about recording hardware and recording software.